Bry's Comics.
In this video, we're going to talk about the recent announcements from James Gunn and DC Studios about the plethora of new TV shows and exciting movies that are coming soon, and how they have impacted comic books in the market, and discuss the idea, is now a good time to buy these key comics? And I think the answer might actually surprise you. In fact, I think there might be some information presented in this video that is completely new and novel to you, that's something that maybe you haven't approached comic book collecting or investing with some of these thoughts before. And because that's what this channel is all about. It's about being a better collector, investor, and speculator. In this video, I really want to break down the difference between collectors, investors, and speculators, because I think if you can define yourself as one of those three or as a combination of those three, it will help to set a framework for how you approach buying and selling comic books in this hobby. But before we hop into it, I want to mention that Bryce Comics is always buying. We pay really competitive rates, and we make the process super simple no matter where you are in the country or even worldwide. I buy comics locally, nationwide, and worldwide. Super easy process. Link down in the description to all my contact info if that's something that interests you. We also do a monthly giveaway here on the YouTube channel. If you subscribe to the channel, comment on this video, and like this video, you're entered to win this month's giveaway. And if you sign up for the newsletter at brycecomics.com, you're entered to win a free slab each and every month. You also get first access to new collections that come through the shop there. Use code COLLECT10 at brycecomics.com. That code is always active for in-stock items. Also follow me over on Instagram for trades for grails. And lastly, on Whatnot. Use a link down in the description for $15 towards your first purchase if you're new to Whatnot, if you use that link. And I always have items in the Buy It Now for $15. So as most people are already well aware, James Gunn made a big slew of announcements that impacted a ton of comic books, announcing all of these new properties for DC in shows and movies. So let's hop into the computer real quick and see what books are moving in the market. Then we'll discuss the idea of whether or not now is a good time to buy for these comics. So here we are in Key Collector Comics. We're going to take a look at the Hot 10 and the Trending 20 and see how many of the books on these lists are associated with James Gunn's announcements. So here in the Hot 10, we have The Authority. This is about the announcement that there is a movie based on the extremely violent team, The Authority. So here's one. House of Secrets, this is related to the Swamp Thing horror film, so this is 2. Batman 655, this is related to the Brave and the Bold movie announcement that's going to introduce Damian Wayne, so that's 3. Swamp Thing, that's 4, and Booster Gold related to the TV series about Booster Gold, so this is 5. 5 of the 10 books on the Hot 10 are related to the DC announcements. Here we're going to take a look at the Trending 20. Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow related to the movie titled Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, so here's 1. Here's that Brave and the Bold, that's 2. 3, Legends, this is a TV series, which is a spinoff from Peacemaker. It's 4, Booster Gold 5, Creature Commandos. This is DC Studios planning an animated show for Creature Commandos that could have live action appearances. So this is really cool that they're going to cross over the animated and live action. So that's 5. Batman 657, that's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, so a solid 12, arguably these two, so a solid 12 of the 20 books on the Trending 20 are related to DC and James Gunn announcements. So there you have the list of current books that are currently trending this week. Next week, I'm sure it'll be more of the same. Maybe some different books will appear, but we're likely going to see a lot of the DC keys associated with these announcements on the Hot and Trending list for many weeks to come. So that begs the question, is now a good time to buy these keys? And I think the answer to that depends on whether you are a collector, investor, or speculator. And before we go any further, I want to take a moment to define the difference between those three things. It's important to note that you can be a combination, and most people are a combination of all three of these things. I myself am a combination of all three, but in rare circumstances, somebody will fall into just one category. So a collector is somebody who just collects comics. Their number one goal is to enjoy the comic books. They have very little to no thought about resale values, about prices paid. Sure, they have a budget, but it's not the number one important thing is price. The number one important thing is collecting, getting those keys, enjoying the hobby. That's what a collector is. A speculator is somebody who invests in comics, who purchases comics with the intent of selling them for a profit. Likewise, an investor is somebody who purchases comic books with the intent of selling them for a profit. So speculators and investors are very closely related, but I do differentiate the two. And the two things that I think differentiate a speculator and an investor is the amount of time that the money is tied up in the comics and the amount of risk. So a speculator to me is somebody who's buying comic books with a short-term resale in mind. They typically want to have their money tied up as short as possible. And also they're more interested in high-risk books because higher the risk, the higher the potential payoff. So a speculator is somebody who's buying comics that have more risk with a potentially shorter amount of time invested, whereas an investor is somebody who is thinking more long-term. They're investing in comics that are tried and true keys, blue chip keys, if you will, established characters in pop culture, and they're not looking for a quick flip. This is a long-term investment. Now, like I said previously, you can be a combination of all three of these things, and I myself am a combination of all three: collector, investor, and speculator. I collect things that are good investments, that have good future potential, and I speculate on comics to fund the whole process. So that's the difference between the three: collector, speculator, and investor. And the reason I think it's important to differentiate and why I think it's important for you to define yourself to some degree on this spectrum is because it will drastically change your buy-in when you choose to buy in on certain comics. It will provide a framework for you to make purchases, and it will help you avoid FOMO. It'll help you avoid making bad purchases or having any kind of regrets in this hobby. And it ties in directly to the DC announcement. So if you are a collector and your number one goal is to get the most enjoyment out of your comics, one of the things that you need to consider is the timing of your buy-in, because you want to own that book when it will give you the most enjoyment. Not necessarily when it's the best price, but when you will get the most enjoyment out of it. So if you're a collector that loves to have that hot and trending book when it's hot and trending so you can make your social media posts, then now is a great time to buy Booster Gold #1, for example. And your number one goal is to get enjoyment out of it. So you should own it when it's hot, because that's when you're going to enjoy it the most. And if you're a collector with no intent of selling it, you're going to take Booster Gold #1 with you to the grave anyways, and your family is going to be the one who goes to sell it. What difference does it make if you pay $700 or $300 for it? Your only goal is to enjoy that comic the most. And so what should be important to you is not necessarily the price, but the time that you own that book. Now, of course, if you're on a budget, a lot of this, has, a lot of nuance, right? But maybe you just get a lower grade copy and you can enjoy it in that moment and not care about, the ups and downs of prices. Likewise, with the same example in Booster Gold #1, my tip to investors is also time your buy-in. Now, with the same book, timing your buy-in is going to be the exact opposite of that of the collector. You want to time your buy-in to when you can buy it at a price that you can sell it for a profit. So now would be a terrible time to buy Booster Gold #1. But that doesn't mean that you should cross it off your list altogether. It means that it should go on another list of books to watch to try to buy the dip, as we say in the hobby. Is now that Booster Gold has been confirmed for a TV show, you want to buy that book at a time where the hype is off of it, but it still has potential to rebound and you have potential to make some profit. One of the most important things as a comic book investor is to mitigate your risk, right? Remember, investors have less risk than speculators. So you want to mitigate your risk. That means going for properties that are confirmed and timing your buy-in in a way that you're buying the dip, because a lot of these properties are are 2 or 3 years out. Some of these are in 2025 and beyond. And there is absolutely no way that these books can maintain the high prices until their release date. We absolutely will see dips, and depending on the property, they may rebound. Now, this is where it gets really tricky because some of these books are seeing highs now that we'll never see again. Some of these books are getting prices now that even when the show comes out and the trailer comes out, there won't be enough hype to reach those peaks again. So this is where it becomes really important for you to, hone your investing skills, really dive into which one of these properties has a lot of potential. And I think a big part of it has to do with hype. And this ties into my number one tip that we'll get to here in just a sec for speculators, and it has to do with hype. I think that there is so much hype around some of these DC and Marvel shows, for that matter, that no matter how good the shows are, there's just no way they can meet expectations. The fact that these shows are announced years in advance, and all of this excitement and hype and FOMO happens way before the show actually comes. By the time the show comes out, people are already fatigued by it. They're already it's almost as if we've already seen it because we've been talking about it for so long. So be really careful with your investments and take a look at the property and see, is there any possible way that all of the expectations can be met and then exceeded? I mean, I can count on one hand how many Marvel related characters and shows have actually exceeded expectations. I think the only one that comes to mind off the top of my head is Spider-Man No Way Home, which was from Sony, no less, who also brought us Morbius. So it's really difficult to exceed expectations because of the amount of hype. Now, this is where it ties into my number one tip for speculators, because also on this week's hot list is The Last of Us. And this is a book and a show that I think had very little expectations going into it. This show, The Last of Us, started as a video game, and I think the people that played the video game and the fan base around the video game knew what to expect and knew that this show had a lot of potential, but that's a relatively small amount of people that were video game players. Now the fan base for The Last of Us has grown exponentially, far and above just the people that played the video games. And so all of those people that are fans of the show now that had no knowledge of the video game had very little expectations going into it. All of this show is completely new to them, and they're wowed by it because it's so good. I, for one, am a huge fan of the show. I think it has a ton of potential, and I think that that's why the comic book is performing so well, that we're still setting record-breaking highs, is because there wasn't a ton of expectations going into it. And so keep that in mind as a speculator, is those are the ones that you want to maybe go hard on, is shows that are coming that have very little expectations, or that there's a big dip with them going on right now. Like, that the show is coming, but all of the attention is off of it. Those are the books that you want to go hard on for speculation. So to wrap it all up, my top 3 tips for collectors, speculator investors. The tip for collectors is don't only buy what you love, but buy it when you can get the most enjoyment out of it. And that may be when the book is peaking, spiking, or it may be when the book is in a dip. That depends on where you sit as a collector and your budget. So my number one tip for speculators is go for those properties that are rumored or are in development that have a ton of potential, because there's a lot of stuff that is optioned or rumored that if you read the actual series, it leaves something to be desired. I mean, let's just say there are some properties that are just absolute garbage comic books, and so maybe don't go hard on those. Actually read the comics, see which ones have the most potential. And my number one tip for investors is go for the ones that are definitely coming, that are in development, that are confirmed, usually with the big two like DC and Marvel, that maybe don't have as much hype or expectations associated with it, because then the actual performance of the show could exceed expectations and prices could go up. And of course, you got to time your buy-in and buy the dip. So not right when these things are announced, but when they have cooled off, right before before they start to pick back up. That's it for this video. Some interesting nuance to these new announcements from DC. I hope that this video was helpful. If it was, please consider hitting subscribe. In so doing, if you also leave a comment and like this video, you're entered to win this month's giveaway. And don't forget to head over to brycecomics.com and sign up for the newsletter over there to be entered to win a free slab each and every month, and use code COLLECT10 for 10% off all in-stock items at brycecomics.com. Thank you as always for sticking with me to the end of the video, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
Bryce Comics.